Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here with another Market Watch episode. It has only been a week since our last episode, but there have been so many changes and shifts all over the market. It's been absolutely crazy. Even though the ban list did only have a few things hit, I feel like the things that weren't hit were just as important as the things that were, as everyone now knows what cards they want to pick up for their own use so that they can invest in those things. Guys, there were so many cards that I wanted to talk about today, I just couldn't fit them all in one episode, so we are definitely going to be posting another Market Watch on Thursday to cover all of these important cards. So guys, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, so kicking things off, let's take a look at Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. So I'm sure we all know what this card is by now. One of the strongest standalone boss monsters in the game, Dragoon is able to single-handedly win games on its own. It's able to pop monsters, burn your opponent, and provide a negate for an opponent's card, all on a 3,000, sometimes 4,000 attack point body. Now obviously, it does have its downsides, requiring you to run a couple of bricks in the main deck as well as taking up multiple extra deck slots, but this card is just so strong that it's definitely worth the risk of drawing into those cards. Anyways, with Dragoon currently banned in the OCG, I think that a lot of people were holding off on picking this card up, which kept its price at around the $40 mark leading up to the ban list. Even though it was fairly new here in the TCG, we do tend to follow OCG lists and trends, so there was a decent chance that the card could have been banned here as well. However, now that we know it isn't, it feels like Dragoon is just a card that absolutely everyone should own at least one copy of. It is still early, but we are now seeing Dragoon incorporated into different decks and strategies such as Virtual World, which previously didn't play it, as this card helps to make up for their loss of True King of All Calamities. It's rather unlikely that we will see this card mass printed anytime soon, as this was one of the chase cards that really helped to push the 2020 Megatins as a set. Rather, I am definitely expecting this card to get a higher rarity version released, maybe as an OTS Ultimate Rare, a Collector's Rare, or even a Ghost Rare, although obviously that is just wild speculation. Even a Secret Rare version of this card would look really nice, and I am definitely expecting Konami to capitalize a little bit more on the release of this card to help push out other products. It's currently up at $75 a piece, so almost double what it was before the ban list. Even though it may cool off a little bit over the next couple of weeks, I realistically don't see it falling below $60 or $70 until we get some sort of reprint that helps push additional copies out onto the market. Of course, we can't talk about Dragoon without also talking about its partner in crime, Predaplantverte Anaconda. This is of course the card that allows Dragoon to be so splashable, as you can go into it with any 2 effect monsters, and it lets you get all 3 bricks out of your deck at once and get Dragoon onto the field basically for free. Obviously, it can suck if this gets hit by Gamma or Impermanence, but if it doesn't, you get a huge boss monster onto the field really easily. Now, Verte Anaconda is typically just going to be a one-of, unless for whatever reason you're running multiple copies of Dragoon in your extra deck. However, it is a really important piece of the Dragoon package that just has one printing available. As a result, we are seeing this card steadily climb up in price. It didn't see a huge spike after the ban list the same way that Dragoon did, but it was between $25 and $30 before, and now it's well over the $35 mark for a single copy of this card. I do think that this card is priced a little bit lower than what it should be for now. I realistically would expect this card to become a $40 card within the next couple of months. However, I do think that there's a good chance that we could also see this card get rarity bumped sometime soon as well. It came out in Dual Overload, and we've already seen Halki Fibrax get an Ultimate Rare upgrade. With Union Carrier now banned, Verte Anaconda is one of those cards that we should expect to see get rarity bumped as well, though obviously we don't know where exactly that is going to be. If you scrambled to pick up your copy of Dragoon for your own use, definitely remember that you should also be picking up your copy of Verte Anaconda to go along with it before it follows Dragoon and continues to climb higher in price. Alright, next up, let's take a look at Cursed Eldland. So I feel like people were kind of 50-50 on the Eldritch engine, maybe because of how strong and consistent the engine was. I know a bunch of people thought that it would go untouched, but then other people thought we'd maybe see Scarlet Sanguine or Cursed Eldland put to 1. It turns out Eldritch didn't get hit at all, and it looks like the Eldritch engine is going to continue to be one that sees competitive play moving forward, as it meshes well with other strategies such as the Zodiac and the Dogmatica. Now, at the heart of the strategy, we have Cursed Eldland, a continuous spell that lets you pay 800 life points to add Eldritch or a golden land spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. Because you can banish the golden lands from your graveyard in order to search for the Eldixirs, Cursed Eldland effectively lets you add any piece of the Eldritch engine. Also, with Eldritch the Golden Lord reprinted in maximum gold, Cursed Eldland is actually the most expensive card from the archetype and one of the hardest to find, a short printed super rare that is currently up at over $50 a piece, a crazy price for a super rare from out of a side set. Now unfortunately, if you're looking to play the Eldritch engine, this is a card that you are going to need to run 3 copies of. It's kind of weird because ever since Eldritch got reprinted, I've always felt like this should be reprinted as well as something like an OTS common or something like that, just to make the whole package a little bit more affordable. Now, Secret Slayers has been out for almost a year, so we should expect to see the other cards from the engine reprinted at some point, though when exactly is anybody's guess. For now, expect Eldritch to either cool off a little bit towards the $40 to $45 mark, or stay steady at around $50, at least until it gets that much needed reprint. The Eldritch engine consistently performed well leading right up to the ban list, and there's no reason to expect anything different moving into the next format. The next card that we're taking a look at here is Chamber Dragonmaid, a card that we actually took a look at just a few weeks ago. So not only did Dragon Link not get hit at all this ban list, but I think you could argue that the deck got stronger with no more true King of all calamities in the format, as well as the unbanning of Dragonbuster Destruction Sword. Dragon Link is expected to be one of the best decks this format. Now, one of the key cards in the strategy is Chamber Dragonmaid, a card that used to be considered part of an optional engine that is now looking like a mandatory 3 of in the strategy. Chamber Dragonmaid is important because it allows you to search for Dragonmaid Tidying, a trap card that can provide additional disruption during your opponent's turn, or function as an extender by summoning the chamber from out of your graveyard. It's something that you can turn into Striker Dragon or Pisty, and if you summon it with the effective LP, you still get its effect to search, so this card works well as either a combo starter or a mid-combo extender. Because of this, Chamber Dragonmaid has shot up in price once again. A few weeks ago, I thought it was crazy that the card reached as high as $50, but now it is all the way up at $70 each. I think at one point for a very, very short window, the cheapest copy available on TCG Player was $100 or $130, something crazy like that. There's definitely a bit of a waifu tax associated with this card, but as a 3 of for a meta relevant strategy, it shouldn't really be a surprise that this card is as expensive as it is. I would expect this card to cool down in price a little bit over the next couple of weeks, though obviously we've been proven wrong with this card multiple times before. We should expect it to be reprinted in the 2021 Megatins, though obviously that's probably not for at least another 6 months, and who knows if Dragon Link will even be a viable strategy at that point. If you're holding onto this card and you're not playing Dragon Link, I would be inclined to look at selling it now before some of the hype for Dragon Link cools down a bit, though based on how this card's price has behaved over the last couple of months, I would expect this card to remain pretty steady at its current price point. So there are other Dragon Link related cards that we will be talking about on Thursday, but for now let's talk about Saber Gothams. So True King was banned on this last list, and that was kind of one of the go-to cards for the Virtual World deck. You were often able to end on 2 copies of it quite consistently, and it's basically a card that would win the game for you single-handedly. The loss of True King does hurt, but it doesn't make the Virtual World deck unplayable. The deck does have a ton of other tricks at its disposal, it's just that the True King build was so strong that it really asserted itself as the best way to play the deck at a competitive event. Now, however, people are turning to other ways to play Virtual Worlds, and one of the most intriguing, although admittedly degenerate, ways of playing the deck is a hand looping variant that features Saber Gothams, a level 9 synchro monster that allows you to tribute an Saber monster, including itself, to rip a random card from your opponent's hand. Of course, this effect isn't a once per turn, so you can make multiples or revive this card with Cloud Castle to hit multiple pieces from your opponent's opening hand and effectively prevent them from being able to play the game. Now, I don't know if this is going to be the best way to play the deck, but it's certainly interesting. Between Gothams, Trishula, and Phantom Fortress Enter Blathnir, you can pretty easily get rid of all your opponent's cards, though I feel like that variant of the deck is much more prone to interruption if your opponent is running a multitude of hand traps. Anyways, we do have 3 versions of this card currently available: the Ultimate Rare, which is about $40 a piece, and the Ultra Rare, which is currently about $15, both from out of Ancient Prophecy. And then we have these Secret Rares that were a tin cover card, which is only around $9 a piece at the moment. Obviously, whether or not this card goes up or down depends largely on how the deck performs, as well as the possibility of it being reprinted in the short future, though based on its performance at the LCS from over the weekend, I don't think that Gothams is a card that is going to be seeing a ton of play even if the virtual world deck does start to pick things up. Therefore, I think that the smart play is to offload your copies of Gothams while there is that little bit of hype for the card early on in the format. Next up is a pretty interesting one. We have Nadir Servant. So actually Nadir Servant and the rest of the Dogmatica cards didn't really take off right when the ban list dropped, but rather after the weekend when the results of the LCS came out. I think that there were a lot more people playing the Dogmatica engine at the top tables than people were expecting. It does make sense. Drytron and Virtual World, the two primary decks that suffered losses on the ban list, never ran any Dogmatica cards, while other strategies that could use the Dogmatica engine, such as the Invoked, Shadal's, Eldritch, and Zodiac, remained completely untouched. As a result, we did see Nadir Servant shoot way up in price as a card that is going to be played at 3 regardless of the size of the Dogmatica engine that you're using. It doesn't matter if you're running a bigger engine with 3 Ecclesia and 2 Punishment, or a smaller engine with just 1 of each. Nadir Servant is always basically going to be a card that's run at 3. The card is now up at $100 for a single copy, as a key piece of the engine that is one of the strongest in the meta today, up from the $70 to $80 mark that it was floating around for quite some time. This is another card that probably isn't going to see a reprint until the 2021 Megatins, which we would expect will bring the card's price down right away. But of course, that is still a long ways away, and there is a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! To be played in the meantime. Obviously, this is another one of those situations where you have to weigh out if it's worth holding the card to play with and selling it down the road when its value obviously declines, or selling it now at its price peak and finding a way to play the game without it. Whatever you decide, I would expect the Dogmatica engine to continue to be one that sees play in a lot of top deck lists over the next couple of months, and as a result, I would expect that its price will continue to remain steady until we get closer to that inevitable reprint. Now, speaking of decks that didn't get touched on the ban list at all, let's take a look at Animador and Archosaur, a key piece of the dinosaur strategy. The deck remains untouched on the last couple of lists, with cards like Miscellaneousaurus, Fossil Dig, and Soul Eating Oviraptor all remaining at 3. Dinosaurs, interestingly enough, didn't do very much at all last format, but were a force to be reckoned with the format prior, so I guess a lot of people thought that maybe with the banning of True King, Konami might want to address Dinos as a deck that could take over in the new format. And at the LCS over the weekend, Dinos did do quite well, most notably with Ryan Yu taking second place at the event. However, I feel like dinosaurs are really similar to what mermails used to be. They're the type of deck that people are always going to turn to early on in formats, as they have the possibility of being contenders and taking those tops out of nowhere while people are still trying to figure out the format, but then kind of fade out again as people realize what the best deck is and become prepared for the matchup. Therefore, even though Archosaur is a $75 card right now, and even though the deck may have done well at the first event of the new format, I would actually argue that Archosaur is going to fall and go back to being a $50 card in about a month as people slowly solve the format. I don't want to sound like too much of a broken record here, but Archosaur is another card that is due to be reprinted in the 2021 Megatins, so you might want to recoup as much value for this card as you can while you can. So Shadal's Schism is a card that I definitely wasn't expecting to talk about here, but with how well the Dogmatica engine performed at the LCS, I guess it really shouldn't be a surprise. Not only did we see some invoked Dogmatica builds playing Shadal's Schism as a one of tech, but we actually saw a couple of deck lists playing quite a large Shadal package, which was really interesting to see. Shadals have been a pretty popular tier 1.5 or tier 2 deck over in the OCG, but I feel like here in the TCG, the deck has struggled to find a place in the meta, though apparently now that True King of All Calamities is gone, more and more people are looking at trying it out. So right now, Schism is actually all the way up at $40 each, which is a lot for an ultra rare from out of a core set. However, I do find it odd that a card like this would get this high, especially because Schism is really just a one of. You only need to run the one copy because you can search it using App Cologne and add it back from your graveyard using the effect of Construct or Winda. In fact, even in the builds that ran a pretty significant Shadal engine, using cards like Squamata and Hedgehog, they only ran one copy of Schism. I think that this card's price tag is more because of how little supply there is available of Rise of the Duelist, as there were just so many expensive, powerful cards from that set that it's just impossible to find any more sealed product to crack open, and the supply that's on the market right now is kind of all that there is. any sort of increase in demand without an increase in supply is just going to result in driving this card's price up. If you're playing with the Dogmatica or Shaddolls, this is definitely a card that you'll want to own moving forward, as ending on Winda can auto-win you the game against certain decks if they don't have an out, though I'd also remember to move your extra copies if you're still sitting on some while the price is up there. Alright guys, the final card that I want to talk about here is one that's actually no stranger to market watches. We have Buster Dragon. So it's kind of strange, but with the Dragon Buster Destruction Sword now unbanned, we did see yet another buyout of Buster Dragon. Now for a while, a format or two ago, the Buster Blader deck was actually a really popular one, as it could effectively counter Dragon Link and also had a pretty neat lock that you could pull off using Buster Dragon and the Buster Blader fusion. Last format, with Virtual World and Drytron running around, the Buster Blader deck didn't really see any play, but for now, with the ban list that we just had, we just saw a pretty significant buyout of Buster Dragon, with the card spiking up to around $60 or $70 before now settling back down to around the $40 mark. This is kind of interesting. I guess it's the result of both people assuming that Dragon Link will be a dominant deck, as well as a result of the unbanning of the Buster lock. However, it should definitely be noted that the Buster lock isn't even really a key component of the Buster Blader deck. Sure, it's something that you can go into with the strategy, but it's not really necessary, and it's not exactly something that the deck is able to pull off all the time. They actually kind of have to open really optimally in order to set up the full Buster lock, and typically you're just ending on Buster Dragon and the fusion. Anyways, Buster Dragon does only have one printing. It literally came out in the same set as Solemn Strike and has never seen a reprint, which is why this card's price is so high and why it's such an easy buyout target with very limited supply on the market. I say this every time we see Buster Dragon get a buyout, which seems to be every few months, but I would definitely offload this card if you're still holding onto it for whatever reason. You don't want to be caught holding onto this card when that reprint eventually drops and this card's price tanks as well. Alright guys, that is it for today's Market Watch episode. There are a lot of really big name cards that we talked about today. These ones were just kind of like the main heavy hitters that I really wanted to prioritize. On Thursday, we will be going over a few other cards that maybe were a little bit more under the radar or weren't exactly headlines, but are definitely cards that you should be aware of nonetheless. Anyways, if you did enjoy today's episode, make sure you hit that thumbs up button for me and let me know. Also, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards that we talked about today, or what cards you guys want to see me cover in future Market Watch episodes so that I can keep the rest of our viewers as informed as possible. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.